In the last video I told you about the RPGs that didn't do it for me in 2025, so now's the time to tell you about the ones that did do it for me in 2025, and that in some cases are still doing it for me in 2026. From the ones I like the most to the ones I like the least, these are the RPGs that did it for me in 2025, Part 1. And yes, there were that many. The Necromancer's Tale. Talk about a game coming out of nowhere to blow me away in 2025. A few weeks ago I didn't even know this game existed. It was not some hotly anticipated title, that's for sure. I didn't have it on any of my wish lists, and even after checking the game's page on Steam, I was only moderately interested in it. Graphics looked meh, and the promotional video didn't exactly do the title any favors. But it looked like combat followed the XCOM model, which I'm totally okay with. The theme of the game seemed to lean into the strange, dark, and mysterious, and it seemed like it took place in the early 1700s Europe. So, a real setting for a change, which I think is cool. So I thought,
I'll take it.
And added it to my Steam library where it was fated to collect digital dust. The only thing that saved it from this destiny was the fact that I was playing Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 at the time, and I felt like I had to take a break because it was getting a little too dense and long in the tooth. And that's when the Necromancer's Tale got its chance. And holy fucking shit. Talk about a gripping story, rife with intrigue, mystery, and conspiracy that puts you in the driver's seat of the experience. Easily the most interesting and best written story in a video game in 2025 in my book, and it was up against some pretty stiff competition. And I tell you, I couldn't put it down until I saw the credits roll. The Necromancer's Tale isn't for everyone though, and I'll be the first one to admit that some of the negative criticism that it's gotten on Steam is well deserved, or at least justified. The game is more slow burn than your average ye olde entertainment review. If you are looking for a game in which the story moves at a quick pace, then you definitely have to look elsewhere. If you don't like games that funnel you into situations for which your character is at a severe disadvantage because of its build, this game is not for you. If you want a game in which combat is prevalent and you are expecting it to involve complex strategy and tactics, well, this is not that game. Also, many choices don't matter, and that includes some choices that absolutely should matter. And I suppose you have to give credit to this little bitch.
Even with a painting filter, the graphics feel far too much like Unity stock assets, and they continuously pulled me out of the experience. As a certified hardcore CRPG fan, i.e. one of the few players who have the hardcore achievement in Disco Elysium, I can't justify paying more for this than I did for Silksong.
Oh, so you got an achievement in a CRPG that everyone knows about, and even got nominated in the most mainstream Game of the Year award show. You must be so hardcore, Yawning Spider. You're not a certified hardcore RPG fan. You are a little bitch who has cock for
breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
If these graphics put you off of playing the game, then you're most definitely not a certified hardcore RPG fan. Because that means that you've probably not played some really good RPGs that don't have decent graphics. Okay, rant over, I just can't stand surfacers who think they are underground dwellers. But yeah, graphics and production values as a whole aren't great in this game. The city looks more like a collection of houses that fell from the sky. I say this town could have seriously used a civilian engineer specialized in urbanism when it got built. The bitch also says,
"You found a great narrator, but the rest of the sound design is pretty forgettable."
Which goes to show that the things he knows about the sound design would fit into a thimble. But even a broken clock is right twice a day. Forgettable is hardly the word I would use, but there are technical issues. Sound effects aren't bad, but the mix isn't great. There are sound intensity issues, panning issues, and sound occlusion doesn't seem to be a thing in this game. And neither is verticality. The sound of water running in this fountain, for example, is a now you hear it, now you don't deal. And same thing with the music. In this part there is spooky graveyard music playing, but there seems to be a force field that completely prevents it from being audible beyond an exact point. So it goes on and off depending on where you stand. It is hilariously bad. Some voices sound as though they were recorded in a phone booth over a public phone from the 80s, and yes, there's only a handful of voice actors and half of them are terrible.
Why, every establishment in Venice has several casks of wine. But I cannot expect much from the palates of laborers, can I?
That woman who helped us earlier had some wine, didn't she?
But hey, if any of these things sound like deterrents or red flags to you,
And I got news for you. That means you're gay.
then consider yourself warned. But the Necromancer's Tale is almost the perfect game for me. It ticked many of the boxes of the things that I want to see in my RPGs, and it brought back memories of things that have become almost lost in the realm of RPGs over the course of the last 2 decades. The Necromancer's Tale starts with a narrated prologue. Usually I'm not a fan of those at all. More often than not, they are a device that writers use to dump all the lore and information that they think you need to understand the game, your character's role in it, and to get you invested in what you have to do. And this is a bad alternative to organic world building in my opinion. But that's definitely not the case with the prologue in the Necromancer's Tale. In fact, I think it's fucking brilliant. First, it sounds like it could have been written in the 1700s. Of course, it doesn't use the embellished language or the figures of speech that they used back in the day, because if they did, we wouldn't understand jack shit and would get bored within seconds. But I think it's convincing enough for someone in the 21st century to become immersed in the narrative. Second, it's convincing while also being lean, which means that there aren't any self-indulgent metaphors or pretentious rhetoric. Every sentence in this prologue tells you something important about the setting in which the story takes place, the historical events that you should know about, or the characters in the story. More importantly, third, your character. That's right, this is the game's character creation interface. This prologue tells your story from the moment of your birth and all the way until you become a young adult. And it lets you play the hand of destiny. You choose the events that shaped your life, how you handled them, and what you thought about them at the time. Every decision modifies your stats, so at the end of the prologue, you have a character that truly is a person who has been shaped by the events and experiences in his or her life. It's also quite impressive that there are branching paths in this prologue and far-reaching consequences to your decisions. So if you choose to be a diplomat and then you choose to be sent to the Ottoman Empire, you get a self-contained story about your days as a diplomat in the Ottoman Empire later in the prologue. And much later in the game, during a very important event, you get to talk to the vizier in his native language, and you get the chance to ask him to help you with a major favor. Your choices during this playable prologue will have an impact on many other things. You'll be more or less qualified for certain jobs depending on your background, some people will be more inclined to help you, and some courses of action will be easier. Remember the playable prologue in Tyranny? Well, this one is more or less the same, only better, because you get to choose aspects of your personality that will have an impact on your character's arc in the story. Speaking of story, a couple of reviews on the game's page on Steam, including Bitch Boys, say the story is above average. But they of course don't say why. In my opinion, this is the best story told in a video game this year. Out of the ones that I have played, of course. It starts with you being moderately suspicious about the circumstances in which your father died. You then start pulling the thread of the mystery and talk to people who in theory might be able to tell you more, but you discover that some of them aren't keen on revealing the information they have, and some others simply don't seem to know much because they became involved because they were hired to do their job, or a job that was slightly outside their wheelhouse. So the information they were provided to do their task was on a need-to-know basis. And that's how you embark upon a mystery thriller that reminds me of those Gabriel Knight point-and-click mystery games of the 90s, only in this game you have RPG mechanics that give you agency over how to pull that thread. As you might imagine, this mystery segues into something much larger that involves the strange, occult and mysterious, political conspiracies, and many other things. The story succeeds in being intriguing and thrilling because, first, solving the mystery is important to your character, and making sure that the mystery does not get solved is important to other characters. The events that take place in the story are important to you, but the world does not revolve around you. You have a stake in the matter for sure, and because of that, you are important to the real big fish in the political game. And second, NPCs aren't quest-giving machines that ask you to fetch this, that, or the other MacGuffin. All of them have stories, backgrounds, problems, and ambitions. They may not ask you to do something for them without even knowing you, because people don't usually do that shit. But if you want to talk to them about something you want to know, or about something that you need, they might impose upon you to do something for them in return. And I love how quests work in this game. There aren't any quest markers telling you where to go, and sometimes you don't even have a journal entry to tell you what to do next. But if you pay attention to the story and to the conversations that you have with the various NPCs in the game, and if you don't lose sight of what you need to do, you'll always get a pretty good idea of what to do next, where to go, and who might be able to assist you. Here are a couple of examples of how things work in the Necromancer's Tale. At some point you need to make a potion for which you need a plant called Senegal Senegalia. There is no quest marker, of course, nor any other indication in the journal entry on how to get it. Remember those journal entries from the OG Fallout? Okay, so what would you do if you were in that situation in real life? You would ask around apothecaries and herb traders, right? That'd be the logical thing to do. And that might eventually lead you in the right direction. But if you have been talking to the people in the city, and if you've gotten them to tell you a little bit about themselves, then you'll know that this guy comes from Senegal. So chances are that you'll go straight to him instead. And of course, what a surprise, turns out he's the man to talk to about this herb. At some point you need to perform a ritual that needs a source of great heat. And a conventional kitchen won't suffice. A modern game would probably tell you where to find this source of heat, and it would add a quest marker just in case. A game like Arcanum or the OG Fallout would expect you to figure out where to find such a thing. After all, it's not rocket science. Where in a city from the 1700s, in this city, do you think you're likely to find such a source of heat? If you're not completely retarded, you probably thought of the blacksmith shop, because it has a forge, and you were correct. You need to find a witch. Who might be able to tell you more? A city guard? Your friend Sophia, who spends her days wandering about doing nothing and her nights drinking and chatting with people at the tavern? Your girlfriend Annie, if that's who you decide to romance, who spends her days working at the hospital and the afternoons browsing books at the library? Or a strange, mystical gypsy who works as a fortune teller at the market and refuses to read your cards because there's a strange aura about you or something like that? I wonder. That's how you get around in the Necromancer's Tale, and that's how you get shit done. Some people have said on the review section that your choices don't matter in the Necromancer's Tale. As a certified safe scummer, I can promise you that that is very much not the case. Sometimes choices don't matter, and some other times they are like lanes in a highway, rather than like a crossroads where the road diverges into different paths, as it happens in Tyranny, for example. But choices do matter in this game, and they matter a lot. If you clear this ritual that you do in front of your house, once you're done with it, then your friend Diedrich, who appears at the worst possible time, breathes in the remaining fumes and faints. But he gets sent to the hospital, and later on, if you get sent there yourself, you'll meet him and you'll be able to talk to him there. He'll later get better, he'll get released, and he'll be able to help you with some things and give you some valuable information. And you'll be able to help him in turn when something happens. But if you don't clear this ritual, he dies. And none of these things happen. I really need to provide further evidence, so I'll give you another example, but it's slightly spoilery, so you might want to click on the chapter marker end of spoiler, or fast forward until this text disappears. If you decide to fully embrace the dark arts, you'll probably decide to infiltrate this estate by casting an invisibility spell on yourself. If you don't, you'll have to get an invitation to the ball and wear an appropriate outfit. And if you are a diplomat, and if you speak Turkish, you might be able to convince the vizier to create a distraction that will allow you to explore the upper floors of the estate without having to use a spell. If you manage to avoid the patrols, you'll probably be able to make it out of there without raising any suspicion. If not, you are going to get caught. If you are creative enough, there are opportunities for emergent gameplay here and there. At some point in the game, you need to fight these guys here. How you fight enemies depends on the type of character you created, but there is an obscure, non-mandatory quest by the end of which, if you played your cards right, you'll have a very, very powerful ally. But in order to use this ally in broad daylight, you'll have to get creative and sneaky. But if you manage to do that, you can bring this guy to this fight. If you do that, your build will cease to be important, believe me. Someone else says that there is no role-playing to be done in this game. Well, we must have played very different games. If anything, the role-playing experience in this game is one of the best in recent memory. And let's see why. I've seen some of you guys complaining frequently about games not letting you do a proper evil run, because the evil path often leads to a bad or unrewarding ending, or is otherwise childish and flat out dumb. Like, you go out of your way to do or say something evil when there is nothing to be gained by doing that. Well, in this game, evil actions are often more effective and more expeditive. And the best part is that your character's internal monologue changes over the course of the game as you perform evil deeds. To the point that if you want to be a good guy, you may start thinking twice about resorting to dark magic to resolve your problems, and feel more compelled to do good deeds in the hope that that little voice in your head starts feeling like the voice of a good guy once again. You experience your character's descent into darkness, and you can see him or her become progressively more desensitized about other people's plight. You even start seeing grotesque structures and images and feeling ill when you enter the cathedral. At some point, you may not even be able to enter it again. But I feel like you are given ample opportunity to steer the ship in a different direction, though I personally didn't always do it. Also, there are plenty of non-mandatory dungeons and fights for you to try your hand at combat, though I wouldn't say combat is this game's strong suit. The Necromancer's tale sits at the top of this list because it brought back a feeling of thrill and excitement that feels almost ancient to me in this day and age. It feels like a game that could have come out 23 years ago for all the right reasons, and a few of the bad ones. It made me say the classic, they don't make them like they used to, in a game that came out in 2025, which is quite remarkable. It reminded me of those isometric RPGs of old that expected you to figure out where you had to go, what you had to do, and who you had to talk to. RPGs in which you were required to read, and in which reading was worth it. And for that, it gets a You Old Gamer Recommend seal of approval. Citizen Sleeper 2. Citizen Sleeper 2 is a non-combat RPG that takes place in a supposedly dystopian space sci-fi setting. The original Citizen Sleeper has been one of the best non-combat RPGs that I have ever played. So I had very high expectations for this sequel. Expectations that were not only met, but in some respects even surpassed. I think Jump Over the Age knew exactly the type of experience they wanted to deliver with Citizen Sleeper 2, and that's why every mechanic and theme in the game, as well as its art direction, feel like a part of a solid, immersive, and very satisfying RPG package in which nothing feels out of place. I want my choices to matter in an RPG. I want the game to acknowledge my decisions and provide suitable outcomes. I want to build my own path to the game's goals, and I would prefer if there were multiple goals for me to choose from. I want the choices that I made at the character creation or character selection screen to carry weight. I want some courses of action to be more difficult or just not viable for my build, and some others to be easier or even exclusive to my build. Well, in my eyes, Citizen Sleeper 2 delivers on all those things, and it does so without resorting to the genre's tired old ways. Citizen Sleeper 2 cleverly builds upon its predecessor's mechanics to add many classic RPG features that in my opinion bring the series a hell of a lot closer to the type of RPG that I'm always on the hunt for. In fact, I think the game's greatest achievement is that these new mechanics make the game feel fresh, original, and different from the first game in the series, but also, because the new features are based on Citizen Sleeper's original mechanics, it still feels familiar and seamless. And this, my friend, this right here is how you do a sequel. Citizen Sleeper 2 uses dice mechanics for everything. The game takes place in various space stations where there are points of interest, like jobs that you can do for money, quest events, and shops where you can buy some of the stuff you need. Jobs and quest events are challenges that require you to place a die in a slot, but they are also skill checks, which means that depending on how good you are at the corresponding skill, you may get a bonus, a penalty, or nothing. The game has cycles, which work like days, and every day you get a new random set of dice. One of the new things Citizen Sleeper 2 brings to the table is companions. People who tag along for the ride for their own reasons, and who have strengths and weaknesses that make them super useful in some situations, and a complete liability in some others. Your character can be one of 3 classes, but over the course of the game you can choose to make it even better at what it's already good at, or strengthen some of its weaker skills. So for example, you can choose to be a machinist, a class that excels at engineering, and then work on your intuit or interface skills. Your companions are a bit the same, though they don't level up over the course of the game. They also don't seem to have the same classes as you do. Bliss, for example, is an engineer, and they, and yes, everyone in the game refers to this character as they every single time, excel at engineering and intuit. But no class in the game favors these 2 skills in equal measure. I guess they aren't into it. But then you have Flint, who is good at engineering and interface, rather than intuit. You also have characters like Nia and Junie, who only have 1 skill, but they are particularly good at what they do, which means they get a +1 bonus to every die they use on a challenge of their favorite skill. I like that companions in Citizen Sleeper 2 have their own stories and lives, and some of them are quite colorful and checkered. Their quests often intertwine with your main mission, and they entail multiple locations and several other NPCs, which is quite impressive. I also like that not playing along with what they want from you may end up with them getting angry and leaving, but depending on how you see things, that might even be a desirable outcome. And there are even achievements that you get for not doing what some of them want. Also, there are several conditions that you need to meet and things that you need to do in order to meet and subsequently recruit some of them, which makes some of them mutually exclusive. Not at all a bad thing in an RPG. Each companion has a clearly defined personality and a series of buttons that you do not want to press, and this makes the conversations that you have with them interesting and your dialogue choices worthwhile. Hell, I even think that if I had played my cards differently with one of them, I could have steered the wheel of the story down a completely different path to a completely different ending, but I wouldn't need to play the game again, which I plan to do, by the way. Some of your companions are a little bit too dramatic when, given the things that they've supposedly been through, they should be a little bit more stoic, probably. And in some other cases, the narration tries to paint them as cool, collected, and level-headed, but their actions aren't always consistent with this description. Still, these are proper RPG companions, and it's nice to have people tagging along for the ride, which was something that we didn't have in the first game. Citizen Sleeper 2 also introduces contracts, which are missions for which you need to bring along 2 of your companions. These missions take place in locations that are far away from any space station, and they require some preparation, like stocking up on fuel and supplies and making sure your dice are in the best state. In my book, contracts are the best thing about Citizen Sleeper 2. They are written in a way that makes them feel urgent and dangerous, and in most cases, there is something of great importance to you at stake. Some of them require you to bring a specific companion along for the mission, but in many others, you get to choose your party. And I like that your party members have comments and suggestions about what to do in these missions that are consistent with their personalities and with their personal goals. They are not procedurally generated comments. In the first game, there were a few places where you could crash for the night to replenish your dice, but in Citizen Sleeper 2 you have a spaceship that you use to travel between planets, which also works as your house. You can cook some meals there to replenish your energy, you can relieve some stress, fix your dice, and later on in the game, if you make the right choices, you can do some other things. Though I won't be spoiling them in this video. And I really like that you have this little motorhome that is both your house and your main means of transportation. Though I would have wanted to see a little icon for each of your party members so that you could go and talk to them whenever you wanted. In Citizen Sleeper 2 you also have an inventory and you now have quest items, and this adds complexity to the game, but it also makes quests feel like quests, because they actually require you to travel between places, convince people, or work hard for an item that you must then take somewhere else. It makes it feel more RPG than the first one. Broken dice are another new mechanic in Citizen Sleeper 2. A lot of people don't seem to like it, but I think it's great. The first game was in bad need of some form of long-term hindrance or some sort of potential impediment that would force you to delay your plans, or put some effort into fixing said impediment first so that you could continue with your mission. It adds sense of peril, and it makes you keep an eye out for the parts that you need to fix the dice so that you never find yourself in a dire situation. Citizen Sleeper 2's story is well written, even if I have some serious issues with a few things, but we'll talk about those later. So the initial stretch of the game immediately establishes who the good guys and the bad guys are, and why it is important for you to escape their grasp and eventually confront them. And it also establishes why it is important for the bad guy not to let you escape. The world building aspect of the game during this initial stretch is seamless. Most of it is conveyed through dialogue and narration, but the writing is lean. It never wastes time with unimportant details. Basically, it doesn't think you're an idiot who needs a lengthy prologue to over-explain things to make sure you get them. In Citizen Sleeper 2, there is a sense of urgency to what you do. You escape the bad guy by the skin of your teeth, but he's still after you, and now you have to find a way to come up with a plan to take the fight to him and gather resources and allies to pull it off, while you keep out of his reach. The first game started by making the case that you first had to procure yourself a house, a job, food, and some medicine, all of which was barely an inconvenience. Literally, the first person you meet in the original Citizen Sleeper lets you sleep at his place for free until you find something better, and he doesn't even give you a deadline for that. He also immediately offers you a paying job. When you visit the food joint for the first time, the owner says he'll give you your first meal for free, or rather in exchange for a story, because he loves stories. And when you go to get your medicine, you don't even have to wait in line, and they give it to you for free. And this is the game's idea of a dystopia? Fuck's sake, man, just tell me when's the next spaceship there. The threat of a big bad corporation coming to reclaim your body builds slowly over the course of the game in Citizen Sleeper. I like that the sequel cuts to the chase and wastes no time setting the stage and the stakes for your main mission from the get-go. I love that the sense of urgency of the bad guy being hot on your tail is driven home by an actual game mechanic. The more you stay in a certain space station or settlement, the greater the risk that he'll find you and cut your adventure short. I did say before that Citizen Sleeper 2 improves upon almost everything the first game had to offer. There are, however, a couple of things that the first game did better in my opinion, but most of them I see as trade-offs for the new things that the sequel brings to the table. In the first game, you could switch over to other quest lines more easily, because they all took place in the game's only space station. You got a better dice this cycle? Well, time to take care of those riskier quests and activities that you have been avoiding. In Citizen Sleeper 2, quests are often spread over multiple space stations and you need fuel to move around. So the game more or less encourages a more disciplined game plan so you don't end up running out of resources. For me, this plan was, go to a space station, do what I have to do there, stay for a cycle or two making money, restock fuel and supplies, leave the space station to prevent the bad guy from picking up my trail, and maybe seize the opportunity to complete a contract, and then go back. It didn't feel repetitive, but I did feel a little bit more constrained than I was in the first game. For Citizen Sleeper 2, the devs decided to go for an autosave model, and I get why they did it. It definitely adds to the feeling of adventure of the game, and it makes your decisions feel weightier, and the game saves very frequently, but I still would have preferred to be able to save whenever I wanted. I think it would have been better if the player had been given the option to choose between autosaving and manual saves. The most important thing that I like better in the original Citizen Sleeper is the fact that the game's multiple endings were very significantly different. The story branched out earlier in the first game, and as a consequence, the path that led to each ending felt different and unique. I remember getting an ending, watching the credits roll, and going back to my last critical decision to take a different route that took me down a path that went on for at least a couple more days before I reached a different ending. And I am not entirely sure, but I think in Citizen Sleeper 2 all roads lead to a final confrontation against the main bad guy. Again, I would have to play it again to know for sure, but I'm pretty sure I will play it again at some point. Now, it has to be said that Citizen Sleeper 2's story and characters were absolutely not made for me. And if the crowd that hangs out in Discord is indeed representative of the 11,100 and something of you that are subscribed to the channel, I think you're going to feel much the same way. I suspect that finding yourself, feeling like an alien in your own body, and finding a place where you can fit in are not at the top of the list of themes that you want to see in your video games. Also, it was almost funny that I was able to predict which characters would turn out to be evil with 100% accuracy. No exception. You see these three people who are in league with the bad guy? Guess which one of them turns out to be first, the most badass, second, the one with the most authority, and third, what a surprise, not really one of the bad guys. This character is also in the original Citizen Sleeper, and it was one of the worst characters in that game as well, by the way. It was supposedly a seasoned, no-nonsense mercenary who was trying to find herself. Yeah, sure, that's definitely at the top of the agenda of someone who has a dangerous job and deals with individuals who could end her life any day. Bliss, who was also in the first game, and your character, actually, are always referred to as they. Make of that what you will. Bliss was a she in the first game, though, if I recall correctly. But, hear me out. Because there are many reasons why this game sits very high on this list. The story is actually very well told. Events unfold as a consequence of the character's actions, and stakes are always getting higher until they reach an exciting climax that feels deserved, earned. Characters and companions have, for the most part, believable motivations, and also good reasons not to make full disclosure of their intentions in some cases. Your choices matter in this game, and not just to you, but to the people who travel with you and to others. The game's length is just right for me. It didn't leave me wanting more, from that run anyways, and it also didn't outstay its welcome. But more importantly, like I said at the beginning of the video, it gives me almost everything I want from an RPG without resorting to the game's most trite formulas. And I think that's how indie games thrive, by delivering on the expected experience and thrill of their genre with new and fresh mechanics as opposed to tried and true formulas. And Gareth Damian Martin, the lead developer of Citizen Sleeper, seems to share this idea, and that's why this game is awesome. Cyberknights Flashpoint. Cyberknights Flashpoint is a tactical RPG that sits somewhere in between Shadowrun Hong Kong or Dragonfall and Phoenix Point. But wait a minute, I hear you say. All those games have XCOM bones. Yes, but Cyberknights Flashpoint seems to borrow many of the mechanics and features that set those games apart from their XCOM daddy. In Cyberknights, you control a character and a party of mercenaries who do odd jobs for a shady patron who has access to a network of even shadier clients, just like a fixer in the Shadowrun universe. And much as it happens in Shadowrun Hong Kong at the beginning of the game, because you owe this fixer, you have no choice but to take very risky jobs. This premise sets the stakes for the first few missions of the game and makes them feel urgent and exciting. The stronghold management aspect of the game is similar to the one in Phoenix Point. There are different types of facilities that you can build and upgrade to make your long-term game easier. They include clinics, labs, intel facilities that get you access to better equipment from different suppliers and contracts. I find the facilities you build in Cyberknights Flashpoint to be more interesting and tactically relevant than the ones in Phoenix Point, though nothing beats the vehicle, weapon, and armor manufacturing facility in Phoenix Point. The things you can build there are just too fucking awesome. One thing that works really well for me in Cyberknights Flashpoint is that you have an intel guy in your party who works like an internal fixer for your company of mercenaries. They call it the Face. He or she is constantly looking for opportunities for your party and providing relevant info on jobs and people. And he has a different talent tree, one that has to do with a long-term game, which I think is pretty cool. Some of the jobs the Face finds require you to commit some of your party members to individual missions, and sometimes these party members have personal stakes in the matter. When you create your party at the beginning of the game, you have to choose one of many possible backgrounds for each party member. These backgrounds will determine their personal quests, the people with whom they have a bone to pick, the people they are inclined to help, and the things you can do to improve your reputation with them. This is actually quite impressive. It's not as scripted as it is in RPGs like Shadowrun Hong Kong and Dragonfall, of course, because in Cyberknights these are player-created characters. Some missions work like companion quests, which means that there will be something personal at stake for a certain party member, and they will have their own objectives. What's interesting about this is that these objectives may or may not conflict with your company's goals, and you may have to put your party at risk and sacrifice your party's objectives to help your companion. This may result in other party members resenting your actions, but depending on how much reputation you have with said party member, he or she may be more or less inclined to be more forthcoming about his or her plans, and they may be willing to be more or less cooperative with your party's goals. Your missions in this game also sit somewhere in between your missions in Shadowrun and Phoenix Point. But know that stealth is a lot more important in Cyberknights Flashpoint than it is in your typical XCOM-based game. And so is risk management. Do you go for all the secondary objectives to farm that sweet, sweet loot and those favors and influence points that are going to make your life easier in the future? Or do you play it safe and make sure you get the main mission done and get everyone back in one piece? And I like how much different missions feel depending on whether or not you set out to complete the secondary objectives. Missions in Cyber Knight's Flashpoint are more elaborate than they are in Shadowrun games. Tactics are a lot more important, and there are very interesting secondary missions that entail great rewards, but also great risks, and more importantly, they require you to plan your mission more carefully. Your choice of party members matters, the consumables and devices that you bring along for the mission matter, and the way in which you use the level layout matters a lot more than it does in Shadowrun games. But the thrill and the stakes that you get from the story are not in the same universe as in Shadowrun Hong Kong and Dragonfall. The game still provides good narrative reasons for you to risk your neck in these missions, but they aren't as thrilling as they are in Shadowrun. On the other hand, missions aren't as challenging or as complex as they are in Phoenix Point, but secondary objectives are much more interesting than they are in Phoenix Point, and you always get the feeling that what you are doing matters a little bit more in the grand scheme of things than it does in your missions in Phoenix Point. The exception is, of course, the main story missions in Phoenix Point. Those are just too fucking awesome. Cyber Knight's Flashpoint's character creation and progression system is hands down the best one I've seen this year amongst RPGs. You have so many options in the party creation interface that they were almost overwhelming to me, and I'm the kind of guy who can't get enough options. Over the course of the game, your party members level up, and when they do, you can purchase nodes in your talent tree or upgrade the ones you already have in different ways. There are class-specific talent trees, but they are a little bit underwhelming. Only a handful of skills are fuck yeah skills that give you a real edge. You can upgrade, however, the ones you have in different ways, which is pretty cool. Most of the nodes on the tree are passive increments, passive skills, or active skills that don't make much of a difference. You have a choice of implants that give you very powerful bonuses, but also come with very serious trade-offs. And you also gain access to new weapons and armor, and a plethora of modes with which to enhance your gear. And that, my friends, is where the character progression aspect of this game truly shines. Itemization is good in this game. If you know what you want from each party member, you are going to have a field day with these weapon mods, trust me. Cyber Knight's Flashpoint was developed by the Trees Brothers, and it has all the good things you expect from a Trees Brothers game. There are plenty of mechanics and features to sink your teeth into, and there is depth to all of them. They don't half-ass any of the features. The game starts with a decent narrative premise, you get to recruit and customize a truckload of companions, etc, etc, etc. The initial story in Star Traders Frontiers, for example, was a little better in my opinion. It entailed more missions, more intrigue, more branching paths that you could follow, etc. But this one is pretty good too. Unfortunately, it also has all the things that I don't like about Trees Brothers games. As it happens in Star Traders Frontiers, for example, the game sells you the idea that there is this big important mission that you need to see through to the end, and it's urgent. There are multiple quests that you need to undertake as part of said mission, different factions that have conflicting interests in regards to the mission, different paths that you can follow, NPCs that have a stake in the matter, and so on and so forth. And these stories are usually pretty good and decently written. But rather than a rising action with ever-increasing stakes that makes the gameplay aspect progressively more interesting, the stories in the Trees Brothers games seem to get progressively less important as you go, until they fade into oblivion or get resolved in the least memorable way you can think of. So their titles begin like CRPGs in which the story component matters, but eventually becomes a sandbox experience that you're supposed to play until you get bored, not until you kill the final bad guy of the story and save the day. Cyber Knights now has a retirement mission, but it was added after the game was already out there, so it feels detached from the rest of the story. And I think I know why the Trees Brothers designed their games this way. They like to add new missions, new classes, new weapons, new mechanics, and they want you to come back and check these things out. And to be fair, they have added a fuck ton of new content, and all of it has been good. And you would probably be less inclined to go back to check new updates for a game in which you've already defeated the final boss. Still, what matters here is that you get a good old Trees Brothers game with lots of mechanics, lots of customization options, fun missions, secondary mechanics that aren't tedious, and serve to elevate the quality of the core gameplay, and it has crazy good value for the price. But that's it, those are the RPGs that did it for me in 2025, that in some cases are still doing it for me in 2026. Part 1. These are games that won't be getting their own video, so if you didn't see Kingdom Come Deliverance 2 or Swordhaven, maybe it's because I still have a little something up my sleeve coming up soon. Also, stay tuned for part 2 of this video, which is already in the oven. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, thank you for watching all the way up until now. If you like what you are seeing on this channel, please consider subscribing and clicking that notification bell to avoid the usual YouTube shenanigans. Come check us out on Discord if you don't mind all the boomer talk that goes on there. I personally love it and wouldn't change it for anything. And share the video if you thought it was cool. Bye everyone.
You're excused. You can go back to playing video games.